Oh, where the fuck did you come from? Like,
Yeah.
like out.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
How to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, come and join the conversation in our Facebook group.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So, how are we doing today?
We are doing good, and I'd like to start off this episode with a little acknowledgement to our previous episode. And newsflash, I'm human.
Wait, what?
I know, right?
You never told me that.
I know. It's hard to believe.
I'm shocked.
We're all human.
Me too?
You too.
Oh.
If you're listening to this podcast and can understand it, you're human as well.
And even if you can't understand it, you're human too.
True. Larry, you're not a human, but we're getting you there.
You want to expand on that a little bit?
Oh, Larry's my cat.
No, I meant on why you're human. I mean, if anyone's been listening regularly by now, they should know who Larry is. I love that. Like, do you want to expand on that? It was like, yeah, this is Larry. He's my cat. Let me show you a picture. Like,
we can show pictures.
No, not showing pictures. Like, maybe later. But not
it's
right
like
now.
Every single time it's like the birth of a child for me. I'm like, look at how cute he is. Everyone's like, yeah, we've seen your cat, Serena.
I mean, I love Larry, so go ahead and expand on Larry as much as you want. But I was thinking maybe the other things that you were saying might want a little expansion.
Looks like I'm going to have to do like just a Larry podcast so I can get it out of my
We
system.
keep threatening it. You know it's going to happen at some point.
It's not a threat. That is a gift to the world.
You know what? That's one of the episodes that's not in our planning notes yet.
The Larry episode.
The Larry episode is not in the planning notes. That's got to go in there.
Stay tuned, people.
Anyway,
back to why I am human. So we were, after we did our recording, something kind of hit me and I was like, there was a lot of negative self-talk in that episode on how I described myself from, where I was in my journey to where I am. And I believe I called myself intolerable.
Yeah.
And
I don't know whether that was the word that you used, but like, and like, it's interesting because negative self-talk is something that so many of us struggle with.
I focus on, I used to be in a place where I'd constantly feel like I was talking down to myself and doing just everything was tail between the legs type of deal. And it's like, well, you did this wrong and you did this. And now I know it was like, then it was me meeting my needs at the time.
Not in the best ways.
And not in the best ways.
Yeah.
Definitely in the red spectrum ways.
And definitely not being aware of interconnectedness or any of that sort of stuff.
No. In self-first, I mean, those weren't even a consideration
blip
back
on
then.
the radar back then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in the time when I was, quote unquote, intolerable, I was meeting my needs in the best way I knew how. I didn't even know that I had needs beyond the basics that we learn and how to meet them and how to do it in ways that were...
I'm going to challenge you a little bit here. Because I think that you're absolutely right. We are meeting our needs. And I also think that there are parts of us that know, like if we're being a little bit mean to other people or if we're not being kind to other people, like something inside us know. I mean, I know I've done this in the past where I haven't been good to other people and it has been a really poor strategy to meet my needs. And I think that there is a part of us that knows that and knows that we could be doing it in a different way. So I don't want to just kind of give us a pass on that and be like, oh, well, I was meeting my needs, so that's okay. I think we can own the fact that we were doing things that we knew at the time weren't the best way of doing things, and we're human, right?
Yes.
So it's like, it's okay to have those human moments, as long as we also take responsibility for, hey, this is what I've done in the past, and that's not who I want to be. And if I can, I'll apologize to those people and make amends for it and what have you. But I think that I don't want to give us a pass because we were meeting our needs and going, oh, because we're meeting our needs, it's okay that we did that thing. And also we want to understand that part of the reason we were doing the things that we were doing was because we were meeting our needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Because years ago, I knew I was an asshole. Like, I knew it. I was proud of it. Like, I was proud of it. Like, it was where I was from. Like, and I still am a bit of an asshole, but not in the same way. And it's...
Well, the thing about it is that you're human and you allow yourself to be all the things that you are. And I think that's the thing, is that we don't allow ourselves to be all the things that we are. And I think that it's like, yeah, there's that part of you that still exists that wants to kind of view the world that way. And that's part of you. And there's also who you choose, where you choose to act from and who you choose to be and where you choose to put your energy. Reminds me of that, the Meredith Brooks song, like, bitch, like, I'm a bitch, I'm a lover, I'm a child, I'm a mother, like all these different, like, it's like we're all of these things kind of wrapped into one. And all of those things always exist within us. Like that, the bitch inside me is always present. The asshole inside you is always present. And who do we choose to give focus and energy to? And who do we choose to operate from? That's where our power lies, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I was in my head again. I was like, oh, I have something to say. Oh, she's saying it.
Well, I didn't mean to talk for you. I just felt like that maybe you were not being as kind to yourself as you could be, in terms of just accepting that, yes, that's present. And I know who you choose to be now, and that's not from that place.
Right. And so, and it's a hard contrast between who I showed up as before and who I show up and choose to show up as now. And taking things such as interconnectedness and self first and all of the things that are the principles of what we teach, and being able to be like, okay. And even in that moment, like, what that could have started, and in the past, what I think it would have started would be kind of a downward spiral into negative self-talk, into the hole. And I'd be like, oh, well, you know, you said this, and then that made you feel bad that you said that, and then you feel bad and worse, and just keep digging. And so I was like, actually, no, I think I'm going to acknowledge it on the next recording and just show people, A, we're human. Like, we try to do better.
Yeah.
And that's the goal.
Well, and I think the important thing with this is to recognize that awareness and accountability. Accountability is the key word here, is that, like, being accountable to ourselves, being accountable to who we want to be in the world is really important. And there's a difference between accountability and blame. And I think that a lot of negative self-talk is very much about blaming, which is about wronging. It's like, I'm wronging myself. And normally that there's we're going to do a series coming up on the difference between guilt and shame. But just a little mini spoiler alert here. Guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me. In a very, very broad nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot of more nuance in it than that. But that's a very kind of broad brush thing. And I think what that negative self-talk tends to be is that it's that shame spiral starting. It's like, there's something wrong with me. I've done something wrong. And that ends up becoming quite a self-destructive spiral. Whereas if it's like, I've done something wrong, and that's where the guilt comes in, because our humanity kicks in and goes, I don't want to do something like I feel bad that I've done this thing and it's impacted somebody else negatively. So that's our humanity that kicks in. And that becomes the internal motivation to not want to do it again. That's where the accountability comes in. Like recognizing I've made a mistake and I don't want to make that mistake, or I want to rectify that mistake. That's what accountability looks like. And I think that what tends to happen with the negative self-talk, especially some of the things that you're kind of referring to, is more, it's almost like self-flagellation of like, there's something wrong with me, I'm a bad person, versus I made a mistake and here's how I'm going to be accountable to that. Here's how I'm going to apologize and make amends and avoid it happening again in the future. And I think that subtle distinction between accountability and holding ourselves accountable for being the people we want to be, and blame, is that it's a subtle difference, but such a profound one.
Well, that in talking about accountability, like, I feel that a lot of times, like, if it was negative self-talk that affected somebody else, and why I'm doing this here and I've gone through my own process of being accountable to myself, because that's not how I want to feel. Like
That's not how you want to treat yourself.
That's not how I want to treat myself. So immediately I went through the steps to meet my needs, to make sure that it felt good within me. And I'm like, well, I've been talking to however many people are listening to that podcast, and I want them to know, A, it's okay to be human. Yeah. B, that I'm human. And C, like, I don't want them thinking that's
a good way of doing it.
That's a good way of doing it, because it's not.
Yeah. I agree. And it's interesting how we kind of started off today talking about negative self-talk, because today we are opening up a little bit of a can of worms, I think. Should be a fun one today, because today we're talking about toxic positivity. Now, this is a big subject, and we are only going to just brush the surface of it today. But I do think it's an important thing for us to discuss and address, especially because people don't realize how much toxic positivity actually compromises needs, and compromises your needs and the needs of other people. So I think maybe to start off with, what are we talking about when we say toxic positivity? What do we mean? And I think that what we're talking about is where it is a false positivity or a forced positivity, where it's like, and it's not true to what's really going on, but it's like we've been told that we should always look on the bright side, or we've been told that we need to focus on the positive, that we need to put energy, like where your attention goes, like that's where you're feeding energy. And what toxic positivity is normally an ignoring or a denying or of avoiding of the reality of what is going on.
A masking as well.
A masking, exactly. It was literally, you took the words, I love how we work together. It's literally like putting a mask on the situation. It's like that, oh God, everything's terrible, but I'm going to put a happy mask on, everything's fine. Like, and it can show up in a number of different ways. But I think that the reason it is toxic is because it is not in alignment. Well, it's two things. One, it's not in alignment with reality. That's not the whole story. But most importantly, the reason it is toxic is because it often compromises your needs and the needs of others. So I hear some people like, why would being positive be a bad thing? Like, why would that, like, how would that compromise needs?
Well, since emotional experience and expression is one of our needs.
And go ahead.
And it's impossible to be happy maybe not impossible, because that's an absolute and we're trying to get rid of absolutes. But the chances of being truly, like, internally happy and positive all the time just isn't realistic.
It's almost like we're human.
Nice tie back.
Coming back to ultimately being human is about experiencing everything that is present, and it is just not the human experience to be in this sense of positivity all the time, because life happens. Like, life is not all sunshine and rainbows, although some of us try to pretend it is, and that's the kind of almost delusion and denial that happens when we go into that toxic positivity of like, no, everything's fine. Remember, let me just paint a sunshine on this and put a butterfly over here. It's all good.
And then when that veil is lifted, like, part of the reason, and sorry, I know that I completely interrupted a thought, but part of the reason that it's so jarring and, like, harmful to those around you and to yourself is because if you're doing toxic positivity, if you're, like, slathering it with a sugar coating, eventually you're going to realize that that's all it was something you kind of slapped on to make it better. And then the reality make it seem better. Yes. Then when you get back to reality, and it's even worse because you have now
There's a contrast
to this, what you've created, and not what you've created.
The illusion that you've been trying to convince yourself is true. There's a disparity between that and reality. And when we talk about emotional experience and expression, we've discussed this when we've spoken about emotions previously, about how that is about experiencing and expressing the full spectrum of emotions. We have a full spectrum of emotions, and it's very, 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 very unlikely, especially in the world that we are living in right now, that you are only having experiences that are going to create positive emotions. Like, we've been through a global pandemic. We're still going through that global pandemic with the political unrest and the various other things that are happening. There's war happening in the world. Like, we're human, and if we are aware of these things, then we're going to have other emotions other than just the kind of positive ones. And this is the thing, is that when we engage with toxic positivity, what we are doing is we are compromising our emotional experience and expression needs. Now, this is not about saying, oh, you can't be positive when something is genuinely positive, because emotional experience and expression is about expressing what is present, or experiencing and expressing what is present. So it's like, if something is genuinely bringing you joy, connecting to that joy and expressing that joy is absolutely part of that need. If what is present is creating anger or sadness or fear or anxiety or whatever else it is, and you slap a positivity like mask on the top of it, what you are doing is you are compromising your emotional experience expression needs, because you're not actually connected to and experiencing and therefore processing what is really happening to you. And what that means is that those unexpressed emotions are going to hang around in the body, and then they can in a number of different ways. One of the other ways that toxic positivity shows up and how it is harmful to other people is when our response to somebody else causes them to shut down their emotional experience and expression need. Now, again, if you are, we've talked about this, I think it was in the previous episode. Like, if you are fully connected with your needs and you know your value and you're going to do what's right for you anyway, you're going to process. Like, if I was around somebody who wouldn't allow me to express what's present, if I'm expressing sadness, for example, and I'm around somebody who's trying to toxic positivity wash that, and you'd be like, no, everything's fine, I'm going to go away and process that on my own. I'm going to go away and feel it and express it and experience it and express it on my own. But most people aren't in that place, and most people haven't been taught how to process emotions, especially some of the less comfortable ones, which is the ones that tend to be up when this stuff is happening. So if, say, I went to Serena and was like, so this really sad thing happened and blah, 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 blah. And she'll be like, oh, but there's a silver lining, or like, you'll be fine, it's okay. And actually the truth is, it's not in that moment.
Or even, oh, let's go get your mind off of it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a difference between sometimes the whole getting your mind off it can be a short-term coping strategy. That's not a bad thing necessarily and inherently in and of itself, where it's like, okay, you can never take your mind off something. Sometimes you need to take your mind off something to give yourself a rest, build the resources to then continue to process it. So I just want to caveat by saying that. But if it's an avoidance strategy of like, oh yes, let's distract you with this shiny pretty thing over here so you're not feeling sad, then what's going to end up happening is that I may, and a lot of people in that situation would shut down and go, well, okay, this person wants me to be happy, so I'm going to force myself to be happy in order to make them happy, or rather to not make them uncomfortable. So this is like just a couple of the ways that toxic positivity shows up and compromises our needs. And obviously, if I go to Serena and she does something that causes me to compromise my own needs, and there's nuance in this, obviously, because yes, we're responsible for our own needs and meeting them. But if how she responds to my thing is actually undermining what's going on or invalidating my experience, then actually she could be compromising my needs, and because of interconnectedness, she's actually going to be compromising her own as well. She doesn't do this, by the way. She's amazing when it comes to emotions and allowing me to experience and express them and holding space and all the things that kind of go along with that. Just an example of a possibility that could happen and frequently happens in our society.
And we took a while to get there too, because now it's sometimes, for Claire, it's like, I just need to get out of this space. I want to go dancing. I want to go sing. I want to do these things. But for me to come in and be like, this is what you need, this is going to make you feel better. No, what would feel good to you right now? And it's asking the questions and me making sure I'm honoring where she's at. If I want to be a support, like if I'm there to be a support, I want to be supportive to her, not to what my imagination thinks she needs. Because 99% of the time it could be, let's go dancing. And then 1% she's like, No, I just want to cry.
Well, and the thing about it is, it's like there's even a different question that kind of sits underneath the one that Serena suggested, which is like what would make you feel better? Well, do you want to feel better in that moment? And actually, sometimes the path to healing isn't about feeling better immediately. Sometimes we need to drop deeper into what's present in order to fully feel it, to express it and release it. And therefore, then that's when we genuinely feel better. And it's that difference between, and this is where the toxic positivity really kind of is amplified, is where we're trying to create this false feeling of being better because we're not actually feeling good, rather than creating true healing, which happens when we process. I remember I went through a breakup several years ago, and it was the first time that one of the mentors who I worked with was one of the first people who said to me, like I was expressing kind of how I was feeling, and she was the one who said to me, okay, let's take a breath, like that. Why don't you just drop deeper into that feeling? And it was like, oh my God, someone's actually inviting me and encouraging me to feel my feelings when they're not, when they're not the most comfortable feelings. But that's what I needed. I needed to actually, that was what was present. And some people might have gone, and I do know, like coaches and mentors who'd have gone, oh, it's really good that you're acknowledging that. So how do we, let's get you where you want to be, which is like, yes, I want to be. And I mean, I have this thing that comes up every time I go through a breakup. I've shared it on a previous podcast, where it's like, when I go through a breakup, I was like, oh God, I wish it was 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now, because I know I will get to the point where I feel better, but I know to get to that point, I got to feel what's present. And that's not necessarily the most comfortable process, but it is the one that's going to get me healed. And that's the most important thing. And I think that toxic positivity is one of the things that blocks healing quite often in these sorts of situations.
And it's what kind of creates in the previous episode with our emotional soup. Like that's what creates emotional soup, is when you're like, oh, I didn't process it. And you may process it a little bit. And the going deeper thing, when I first became part of this process, I was like, so I'm upset and you're telling me that I should go a little deeper and be more upset.
I'm not telling you. I'm asking you if that would be helpful, or inviting you to explore that as a possibility. And that's the thing, it's an invitation.
It's an invitation. And sometimes it's like,
you can take it or no.
No, I don't have the capacity for that. And then sometimes it's like, I have to deal with this. Actually, there's somebody here to support me in dealing with this. And it's the choice, which then reinforces your own personal power.
Ding, ding, ding.
And something I want to say before I lose it, we're going to try and keep the train out of the episode today. So train of thought, and there I go. Toxic positivity sets an expectation and a bar almost for others and for ourselves. And it's an unrealistic bar. It's not even there, because it's not realistic. But when we get into this habit,
we still relate to it as if it is.
We do. And we get in this habit, like, oh, it has to be positive, and everybody has to be positive, and I have to be the sunshine in this person's day. Oh, this person is, been sick or down in the dumps or all these things. And instead of, great, you're not going into the hole with them, because we don't suggest that necessarily either.
Right.
But trying to kind of put this sparkly glaze on it isn't helping anybody. It's not helping
anyone. And there's a difference between jumping into the hole with somebody, i.e. you're jumping into your own hole while somebody else is in theirs, and sitting in the hole with them while they're in their hole. There's a difference between those. And we'll do an episode in the future about holding space and the difference between collapsing into somebody's experience and pulling away from it, and what holding space is actually just being present with it, with them while they're being present with whatever's going on. But I think I think you're absolutely right. I think that so often it sets this unrealistic expectation of how life should be. I mean, it's like looking at freaking social media, like looking at Instagram, and it's like, this is what life is for everybody. No, bullshit. That's not what everybody's life is. That's the toxic positivity version of their life quite often. And then that's one of the things, the reason that I'm very mindful of when I share on social media, I share what's present. And that sometimes it's funny, because often, like, I'll share that I'm struggling with something and people will think, oh God, we've got to support Claire, and I'm not sharing it for support. I mean, as much as I appreciate it, I normally have all the support I need, either within myself or with the people who are closest to me. But I'm sharing it so that there is an accurate representation of my life, that it is this balanced whole experience of all of the emotions that are present. And I think that when we get into this kind of toxic positivity, and it's especially toxic when we're dealing with difficult subject matter, and when we're dealing with difficult situations. So for example, like when we're starting to look at the social justice and privilege stuff, if everybody's wanting everyone to be comfortable and everyone to be happy, you're not doing your work, because that work does not involve being comfortable, and you cannot be comfortable while doing that work. If you're dismantling your privilege, it is an inherently uncomfortable process. It has to be, because one of the benefits of privilege is that your comfort has been centered and prioritized, and in order to collapse that and start to dismantle it, your comfort has to be deprioritized and decentered in the conversation, and the comfort of the person who's been harmed has to be centered. And that's the thing, is that when we want to have these conversations in a polite, kind, comfortable way. Now, I'm not saying that we need to be harsh or we need to be brutal in how we're approaching this. There's a very big difference in being direct and being brutal. And a lot of the time when we're in these situations, because of our privilege, we take directness as an attack, or we take directness as someone being brutal with us, when actually we're just calling it what it is. And we're not used to that, because we're used to having our comfort catered to. So a lot of the time that kind of toxic positivity enters those spaces, because it's like, oh, I want everyone to be happy and I want everyone to be comfortable. And that's not possible within those spaces, and for the work to truly be being done. I know I've had this experience when I've been talking about male privilege with men, and it's like that people have said to me, oh, well, I need to talk about it in a certain way, and I want to talk about it in a way where they can hear me, like the person I'm speaking to can hear what I'm saying, and there's an art, a line, a balance. There is not a formula for this. There's not a right way of doing it. So there's not here's the solution on how to do this, which is part of the reason it's so challenging. So I want to have a conversation, but I also don't want them to be comfortable, because if they're comfortable, they're not really doing the work. In the same way as if I'm comfortable and I'm dismantling my privilege, I'm not really doing the work, because it's inherently uncomfortable to look and face the reality of these systems and the reality of our complicity and our active participation in these systems, or passive participation in these systems. And that's uncomfortable to look at. And if we're wanting everything to be positive, then it I wouldn't say whitewashes. I mean, obviously, depending on, like, quite literally, depending on the privilege we're talking about, but it creates this this veneer, which means that the work actually isn't being done. And so I think that's one of the ways it shows up. The other way that it shows up is when it comes to inspiration. Inspiration's a muddy place, because quite often when you think about like inspirational quotes, a lot of the inspirational quotes, they are about toxic positivity. They are about creating this veneer of everything's wonderful and everything's sunshine and everything's rainbows. And it's like, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to create something that feels positive, something that feels good. There's a difference between, there's a neutrality in the space, and I want to create something. So I'm going to put my energy in towards creating something that feels constructive. I don't even think like the word positive has got so much charge around it, or positivity's got so much charge around it, like something that feels nourishing and constructive and supportive. That's absolutely a great thing. But when sometimes these things are used to bypass, it's like, oh, there's something uncomfortable and sticky and yucky here, and I'm going to use this inspirational quote comes in that tells me, oh, here's how you do this. I mean, I see it a lot. I've seen it a lot in the personal development space. I can't tell you how often the techniques that are taught in personal development spaces are about ignoring or avoiding or repressing or distracting from what's really going on. Whereas it's like, oh, you're feeling this, do this so that you won't feel that anymore. And it's like, but if that's what's present and it's a valid emotion because of this thing that I've experienced, I got to process that in order to heal it. And it's the reason that a lot of personal development actually gets in the way of true personal healing, because a lot of it is bypassing what's really going on, certainly from an emotional standpoint.
With the toxic positivity posts, one thing that always kind of, at this point in my journey, that always kind of like, ooh, like I see what you did there, is kind of disregarding and invalidating past experiences, past traumas, past, struggles, and being like, well, you learned from it, and, this was meant to happen.
It's almost going one step further than invalidating and undermining. It's almost celebrating and like revering in some way.
You should be happy that you had this happen because you're here now.
Because that's what's made you who you are. And it's like, ugh, sorry. They're having like literally my body physically, I mean, obviously I was exaggerating that a little bit, but like my body has a physical response to that. I'm sorry, I jumped in the middle of what you were saying, but I just, it's almost further that you were saying that it undermines those experiences.
And I can only imagine like the different layers of marginalization, like if that's impacting me here, like
right. Yeah.
People reading it who do not have the understanding of me. Like, that's why we're getting this out here, because like, it's so important to be connected with what's actually present.
And what's actually real and what's happened. And as somebody who, I've experienced a number of traumas in my life, we both have. And it's a lot of the time, in these kind of spaces, those things are positioned as like, well, that's made me who I am. And it's almost like that's something I'm grateful for. And it's like, I mean, I went through an incredibly toxic and at times abusive relationship. And I know that if that hadn't existed, the universal needs might not exist in its current form. That doesn't make me grateful for that experience. This is what I chose to do and create from that experience, but that doesn't make that a good experience, and it will never make that a good experience. It's what I chose to create almost out of the ashes of what happened to me, and that's my choice to do that. But that doesn't mean to say the thing that burned to the ground was a good thing. Like, yes, it might, you can take opportunity from things, and you can take these experiences and learn from them, and that's learning is about your choice to take something from it. But let's stop referring to these traumas and these incidents and these experiences that people have had that have caused real harm at a deep level. And we will go into the different levels of trauma and what that means about in the context of needs in another episode. But those things have had a very real impact on our needs, sometimes momentary, sometimes for years, sometimes generationally. And to suggest that that's a good thing is beyond harmful, because what it does is it positions those things as being as I said, something to be celebrated. And it almost means that when someone's in that situation, it's like, well, maybe this is the thing that I need in order to get me where I'm going, rather than having the alarm bells going, this is toxic, get out now. You don't need to go through it and have a trauma in order for you to grow to be the person that you want to be. And I think that's a very, very dangerous thing that kind of comes into these spaces.
Something that just came to me as you were saying that is almost the flip side of that as well. As you may or may not know, my mom passed away 6 years ago. And that was there was a lot around that. And I have since processed, and I create a positive, like what I've created from that has been very positive, and it is part of who I am today. And it's interesting when I put a positive, when I express the positivity that I have around my experience with my mother's death and, what I've kind of created with it, a lot of times people, because I'm the one being positive about it, it's almost like they flip and they're like, oh, well, her mom died. We've got to be really sad about this. And like, yes, it's a sad thing. Don't get me wrong. But it's like when I'm positive.
Or that you're being accused of toxic positivity.
They're like, no, you can be sad. And I was like, I know. And there are days that I am. And most of the time I'm trying to create something differently. But it's like,
Well, it's that wholeness thing. It's the wholeness of the experience. And wholeness is one of the needs that sits in the leaves and the fruit of the universal needs tree. But the interesting thing about this is that there are very few situations in life that are entirely positive or entirely negative. And as a race, certainly in the West, what we tend to do is we tend to try to make something either wholly positive or wholly negative. And that's not the reality, because yes, obviously it was tragic that your mum died as early as she did. And of course you would have wanted to spend more time with her, and her passing meant that she wasn't in pain, that she was. And it's not that it's not a good thing that she passed. It's not a bad thing that she passed. It is just a thing. And it's a moment that has all of these experiences attached to it. Like, there are things about it. I remember there's a great TED talk called Beyond Closure, which is actually about death. And I can't remember the lady. I'll put the link to it in the show notes. And she talks about the fact that, and I watched it when I'd lost somebody close to me, and I was looking for something to help me kind of navigate through that journey of grief. And one of the things that she talked about is that when somebody dies, that we want to put it in a box and have closure.
Fuck your box.
Sorry?
I said fuck your box.
Yeah, we don't do boxes. We don't do boxes. Well, what she's talking about is like wanting to put it in a box, and the closure of that, as in like it's like people want a closure to the grief. They want a completion to the grief. What they want to do is put it on a shelf and not have to think about it and not have to feel about it anymore. But the reality is that the grief that we feel is inherently connected to the love that we feel for that person. And by putting it on a box and closing it, we disconnect from that as well. And so what she was saying about is that most people who have lost somebody, they want people to ask, so tell me, like, what was your favorite memory of that person? They want to tell the stories. And yes, there might be sadness in that telling of the story because that they're no longer here. And there's joy in it as well, and there's love in it, and it's like all of these things are present.
I was just thinking,
feeling this is resonating.
Oh, well, we had said we went out on the boat this past weekend, and it was to honor one of Claire's family members, and it actually happened to be my mother's birthday as well. And interestingly, we were talking about the day she died, and it was, if you know me, if you know my mom, it was, part of me wants to say perfect, and like the weirdness
it felt right in how it happened.
Yes. And we were laughing about it, and everybody was laughing about it on the boat. And it was like, it was something that initially I couldn't talk about. It felt good. And it was like, and I can, now that I've processed the grief in it, I can enjoy what was like the day she died. What was good in that?
Right.
And there were some amazing moments that I still get to talk about, I still get to laugh about. But if I could have easily boxed that day up and been like, nope.
Yeah.
But every day I wake up and my mom's not here.
Right.
So if I'm not going to deal with it, it's not like one day I'm going to wake up and be like, oh, it's fine.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I had a similar thing. Like, I'm about to go on a vacation. In fact, I think I may actually be on vacation when this drops. So I may be already there. And we used to go, I'm going with my family, and we went with a very, very dear friend who was a adopted family member. And this is the first time I will be going back to that location without him. And he was always a part of those experiences. And if he were still with us, he would be coming. I have no doubt about that at all. And it's interesting how just last night I was talking about this, and I was saying it's going to be weird, like not having him there. And I said to the person I was with, I was like, did I ever show you the memorial video I made for him? And he said, no. And I said, let me show you. And it's this piece of this video that's got like all of these photos of these like funny moments and these like in jokes, and there's little clips of video of him and another friend dancing in France badly, but still managing, which for them was a real achievement. Like with music that had meaning. And it was like I was watching it last night, and that it's that there's almost like a clash of the emotions inside of me of like there's such joy and laughter and love in those memories, and there's still that bittersweetness of the fact that those memories, I won't get to create more of them this time. And it's like, and yes, it's all true. Like that thing doesn't have to be. And that's the thing is, I think it's interesting because this started out as being a podcast about toxic positivity, but I think it's actually a podcast about wholeness and about how we don't want to be toxically positive or toxically negative. What we want to do is embrace and acknowledge and allow all of the emotions that are present around something. And actually, it's one of the things that we struggle with in our society is, as I said, like we tend to make something right or wrong, good, bad. So it's like, oh, this is a bad situation, so I must feel bad about it, so I must feel sad. Or like, oh, this is a good situation, so I must feel happy about it. It's like, yay! Like, for example, like when somebody finds out they're pregnant, often that can be a good experience. Sometimes it's a not so great experience. But even if somebody wanted to get pregnant, there's a reality that comes with that. Like, okay, sleepless nights on the horizon, and my body's going to change, or the person I'm with's body's going to change, and they're going to go through some experience. Like, it's not all just one thing. And I think that the toxicity comes in trying to make something all one thing or all another, and not honoring the wholeness and the realness of every experience. And any time that we are not honoring and respecting and valuing the whole experience, there's going to be some toxicity in that, because we're denying part of the experience for whatever reason, either because we think it's the appropriate thing to do, if like, oh God, like I can't laugh about my dead mom because that's not appropriate, quote unquote, to the rest of the world, and everyone else will think I'm weird. Some people don't care. Right?
I obviously have zero fucks about that. And I've been making people uncomfortable since probably since before I was like.
And the thing about it is, not intentionally. It's not like you're trying to make somebody uncomfortable. You're being you, and you're being real about it.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah, in this moment I'm joking, and sometimes I'll be laughing and crying all at the same time, and that feels good because I'm not holding back any of it. Because when my mom first passed, I got a lot, and I think I've mentioned this before, I got a lot of kind of pushback on how I was handling it, because I was A, doing me, I was B, doing what my mom would have wanted. And I was C, I even before I knew about this work, before Claire was a twinkle in my eye type of thing. Twinkle. You're so twinkly.
I'm so twinkly.
I'm sparkly, you're twinkly.
I have moments. But I'm not always twinkly. Sometimes I'm like a little black cloud. And that's fine too. Like I'm all of the, like we're all of the weather.
All of
types
the
of weathers at the same time. I'm not sure really sure that twinkly is a type of weather, but hey.
Well, in the stars when it's clear.
Well, yeah, there we go. Sorry, I interrupted
back
you.
to my dead mom.
Yeah.
But even stuff like that, like if I had to hold that part back of me because I felt I had to be super sad, or that I could only talk about like appropriate happy memories, I literally wouldn't be me.
Right. And you wouldn't be representing the truth of your relationship with your mom and who your mom is,
and that's, I feel, because I've been able to be where I'm at with it, when I'm at with it, how I'm at with it, I surround myself with people who understand me, understand emotions, understand the good, the bad.
Who's that?
I don't know. I'll introduce you sometime.
Oh, cool.
I'm able to process. I'm able to bring her like to life. And, you know, people sometimes are very surprised when they find out that my mom's actually died. So they're like, oh, I thought she was still alive. Like, I thought she was going to come and make us Bloody Marys next weekend.
Well, it's funny. I was saying the other day, like, it's weird because I never met Sharon. And yet I feel like I know her. Like, I feel like we've spent time. I mean, we have spent, like, if you've ever seen the photos of us out with Flat Sharon, which is the flat cartoon representation of Serena's mom, we have technically spent time together. But I feel like I know her, I knew her, and it's funny, like someone, oh God, yeah, that was Serena's mom, and then someone was, oh, so you knew it? No, I didn't, but yeah, I do, because I feel like I know her through Serena being completely real about her and about the experience around her life and her death and all the things in between. The other thing I want to add to this is that a lot of the time the reason for the toxic positivity is because we feel like we've been trained to do that, as in like we've been like, you must focus on the positive, like good vibes only, positive vibes only. I mean, how many of those hashtags do we know and see? And it's like, no, that's not real. But a lot of the time the reason for the toxic positivity is because we are not comfortable with real emotion, because we haven't, a lot of the times, like when we haven't gone to those places within ourselves, we haven't let ourselves go to the places of sadness or anger or frustration or disappointment or whatever it is, that we are very uncomfortable witnessing somebody else go through it for a couple of reasons. One, we don't know how to deal with it because we haven't dealt with it ourselves. And two, it can sometimes trigger that stuff within us. And that's where, as like we were talking about earlier, you're not sitting in the hole with somebody while they're in the hole. You collapse into your own hole, and you're both in separate holes but together, which is not helpful to anyone either. That's not to say you shouldn't process your own stuff, but it's like, if somebody's in the hole, maybe that's a good opportunity for you to be like, okay, I'm going to sit with you while you're in your hole, then I'm going to go and deal with my hole, and I'm going to go and heal my way out of my own hole as well. But us sitting in the holes, just like wallowing in the holes together, is not necessarily always helpful, and not necessarily a bad thing. We've done that simultaneous hole sitting.
Yes.
Not wallowing.
No. It's
processing
like, oh, you're in a
to
hole?
heal.
How, can I be supportive in any way?
Yeah.
Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, you're into your hole still?
Cool.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well,
But I think that's the thing, is that so often people don't know how to be with somebody when they're being with challenging emotions. And so that trying to like force that positivity, like they're trying to force them. It's a little bit like when we've talked about this in the emotions series that we did. And I'll put the episodes in the show notes. Like when we talk about the emotional tunnel, where it's like it's important to go through the emotional tunnel. A lot of the time that toxic positivity is like, no, I don't like that tunnel. Let's pull you out of that tunnel and put you over here, because I know how to deal with this. I know how to deal with someone who's happy. I know how to deal with someone who's fine. I know who to deal with somebody, even someone who's just putting a fine, like a happy mask on things because everything's fine. Like, I know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with the tunnel. Mm-hmm. So I don't want you to be in that tunnel. So that toxic positivity, and that can be us doing that to ourselves. It's like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I want to pull myself out of the emotional tunnel. Okay, that was weird and scary in there because we've never done it. And the reality is that how we learn how to do it is by doing it and by getting support from people who can guide us through that process. It's a process that I take clients through on a regular basis, where a lot of clients haven't actually processed their emotions. They need just a space where they can come and be like, I'm really scared about this emotional stuff because I've never done it before. And they need someone who is going to be with them so that if they feel lost in the middle of it, which actually very rarely happens, or if there's this fear that they're going to be overwhelmed or drown in it, that there's going to be someone there to support them and help them, guide them through that emotional roller coaster or that emotional mire that they're in order to get to the point where they feel like they can kind of continue on their own.
And the more, I want to just jump in, the more that happens, at first it's hard. It's hard for the first couple of times to be like, oh shit, I'm actually going to walk through it instead of going around it like usual. And then it becomes really like, it becomes easier.
Yes.
I don't want to say it's easy because you're still processing,
and I think it's not that it's easy, it's still uncomfortable, but it is so much easier,
and it's almost inviting because you know what it feels like to have process, like what does it feel like to not carry things? I mean, some of the littlest things that I used to carry around with me, mind-blowing how heavy they were.
Right.
And it's because I pushed it down, and it was like a little niggle to begin with, and then the longer that niggle sits, it kind of grows into its own manifestation. It's like, oh, where the fuck did you come from? Like,
yeah,
like, out.
Well, and it's like, because I remember I had a friend of mine who once said to me, she said, Clay, you're one of the weirdest people I know. I'm like, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. Like, what do you mean though?
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Yeah. And she said to me, she said, you're the only person I know that when you see heartbreak on the horizon, you walk towards it rather than away from it. And I said to her, like, I remember saying to her, that's not because I enjoy heartbreak. It's because if I know that's on my path, I want to get in it and through it as quickly and as easily as possible, with as much ease as possible, because I know that if I don't, it's going to hang around. If I walk the other way, it's going to follow me. Like, I don't get to avoid it. I don't get to ignore it. It's going to continue to be present in my life until I process through it. So yeah, if I see that on the horizon, damn straight, I'm gonna dive in and go through it, because I know that through doing it that way, it'll be quicker and easier. There'll be less. It'll impact me far less than if I try to avoid it or deny it or ignore it or repress it or any of the other things that we do to try to resist what is actually present.
Little side note for future podcasts about relationships that no longer serve us.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that one.
Absolutely.
I do want to make a note on another toxic positivity that I don't think people really initially will identify as toxic positivity. If you're talking to a friend and you're talking about all these things that are going on, and let's say that it's not in the positive space, so to speak. So you might be sick, you might be going through something at work, you might have a bunch of things going on. And if you're talking to somebody and you're having this intense, deep conversation or telling them about the things that are going on that aren't positive, and then maybe they acknowledge it, but then at the end they slather on like a thick layer of toxic positivity at the end, but I hope things are going to be great and it's going to be magical and like all of these things. It's like, did you hear what I said? Like,
well, I think that a lot of that, again, it's that same thing of like, we don't know what it is to just sit with what's present. And a lot of the time it's like, I'm going to tell you all the stuff that's going on, and I'm going to tell you all the stuff that's going on, but I don't want to leave the conversation on a quote unquote negative note. I'm just leaving it on a real note, but okay. So it's like, so yeah, this has been great. Like, it was really good catching up. Like things are amazing right now, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's almost like it almost reminds me of the shit sandwich.
Yeah.
Like, because like people are taught at work, like if you're giving feedback, to do it as a shit sandwich, which is you do something positive, you give the quote unquote constructive criticism in the middle, and then you finish with something positive. And it's almost like we've got into that habit of like, oh, I must start positive and finish positive, otherwise like the world's going to collapse. And the reality is that's not true. Like, actually, you could just be like, thank you for listening. I really, it's really helped me to talk about this. Or I just really appreciate the fact that you heard what I said.
Like, on the other side of it, simply witnessing, I hear you. Like, that sounds challenging. Identifying with it and being like, I hope things get better. Like,
even that, like, the part of the chat, yes, that can be helpful, and this is, and with all of these things, there's nuance. Like, it's not that this is a good thing to do or not a good thing to do. There may be, I know sometimes that for me personally, like when somebody said to me, depending on who it is, if someone said to me, I hope it gets better, I know that the next time they speak to me, they want me to be in a better place.
It's almost like the rush to...
There's like a pressure to be better.
Have to be better.
Exactly, to be in that better space. If Serena says to me, I hope that gets better, I know she just genuinely means, I hope that you move through this to a point where it feels better soon, and you stay there as long as you need to, because that's what it means to process and heal.
It's not the rush to get out of the space. It's
But even just as you were saying, like, you can do the witnessing thing of like, I hear you, that sounds really difficult, and then be like, is there anything I can do to support you? Like, that's something you can offer in that space, which is not about, everything's going to be fine, or like, even that's the thing, is that like a lot of the time is that it'll be I'm experiencing all these things that I'm telling you about, saying, but I know I'll be fine. And it's like, well, we all know, like, if I said that to Serena, she'd be like, well, duh, we know we're going to be fine, but that's not what's present right now. And I think you would like look at me sideways if I said that. I'm like, why is she saying that? That's unnecessary. Because we don't need to say that to feel in alignment with what's going on.
Yeah, just hearing you say it, it's like, that's not a thing you say.
No, because we're real, and we're just honest about where it's at. And I think that go on.
Positivity, like if you want to give somebody positivity, if you're trying to, positivity can be love. Positivity can be like at the end of
I got to jump in. Sorry. My question to you is, why do you want to give somebody positivity?
Okay, I'm going to rephrase that. It's not positivity I'm talking about. Let me tell you what I'm talking about, and then maybe you can figure out what I'm trying to say.
No, I know what you're trying to say. I just want to touch on this first, because you're like, a lot of people do want to give somebody else positivity, but normally that's actually about meeting their own needs, because they're uncomfortable with the other person not being positive. So it's like, let me give you some positivity so I can make you better.
And even if it's not positivity, even if it is just that they want to give something.
I'm trying to fix the situation. Like that view of like, oh, you're broken, you need to be fixed. Here's the thing that will fix it. And I'm going to make it better for you. Bit of the rescuer dynamic, which we're going to talk about in a further podcast as well.
Recovering
Yes.
sometimes struggling as you
So I think that what you are actually trying to being that I know you, what I know that you would want to be suggesting in this, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, you can call me out if I'm talking bullshit.
She's always in my head, so this isn't like this. This is okay.
Yeah. And I know she'll go, nah, that's not it. If I say something and she's like, oh no, that's not resonating. When somebody's in those spaces, if you want to offer support, there's a difference between offering support for where somebody is at and wanting to offer positivity, which tends to be about changing where somebody is at. So it's like, how can I support where you are right now? So I can send you love, or I can say that I'm with you, or that remind you that you're not alone, or let you know that I'm free to talk at this time if you would like. That there are things that you can do to offer support to somebody, but there's a difference between supporting them and trying to give them something they don't have because you view that they should have this thing.
And that's the motivation for you giving it to them.
Yes.
Is them. Yes, that is correct. I mean, there's just times that like a simple, just want you to know I love you. Like that's what that, like, more so than the sprinkling of the positive toxicity, the
Toxic positivity?
Yeah.
That thing.
Yeah. Like that's like, yes, that.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, like with the two of us, that's one of the things that Serena does so frequently. Like if I'm going through it, and there have been some times recently where I've been going through some shit, let's be honest. And
it's like an open face shit sandwich.
The thing about it is that so often I'll share that with Serena, and there are 3 sentences, like 3 phrases of some like varying degrees of variation that tend to come from her. I hear you, so I feel heard and acknowledged. You're not alone in this, so it's a reminder that I have support and I love you. That alone, it's like, thank you. Like it doesn't make me feel better about the stuff that I'm dealing with, but it's that reminder that I have support and I have somebody who is willing to be with me when I am being with the shit, and that I'm not doing that by myself. I have to process it for myself. That's something I do myself because that's part of the healing. But the thing is that by knowing somebody is there with me while I'm dealing with it, just makes it feel a little less cumbersome to deal with and a little less overwhelming. And that honestly is the most supportive thing that I get. And Serena's one of the people who says that, who says those things to me. I've got a very dear friend in the Netherlands, Sharona, who also, like, we've learned through going through life with each other, the things that are supportive that the other person can hear. And so often it's like, here's what's going on in my life right now. And it's like, I can't make that better, and I don't want to. I just want you to know that I'm with you and I love you.
The check-in is also something that is really, I mean, I think it's a really important thing. If you know somebody close to you is going through this shit and they open up to you about said shit, like checking in a day or two later, being like, just checking in, thinking of you. Even there are times we have an understanding, zero capacity, still acknowledge, just an emoji.
It's some form of connection, and it's some form of them. And the checking in, and here's the thing again, depending, if there was somebody else in my life who was checking in, I'm like, oh God, they want me to be better, and I'm really not. If it's Serena, I know she just genuinely wants to let me know I'm not alone, let me know she's thinking of me, and see how I'm doing, and just check in and see where I'm at with my process. And there are some days it's like, I'm in bed. The world sucks today. And she'll be like, I hear you and I'm sending you love. I'm like, thank you. Love you. That's it. That's the conversation. And there are some days where it's like, actually, I'm feeling much better today. Like, here's how I've processed over the last couple of days, and here's what's happening. And so I think that's the key thing with this, is this not having an expectation for where you want somebody to be, and being willing to be with them where they're at.
And not having an expectation of where you should be because of how, we've been conditioned as a society, right, or, your dynamics in your relationships, like.
And finding the places where you can be real.
And the people you can be real with.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, wholly real. all
of me. And I mean, then sometimes that's a lot.
Sometimes.
Okay, a lot of the time it's a lot. And that's the thing, is that I know I can be all of that with Serena, and it's not going to, it's that actually not only can I be that, she wants me to be that. Like,
and I'll call, and we'll call each other if we're not being that. It's like,
yeah, really?
You want to go a little deeper with that? It's like, oh, fuck. I mean, I've stopped trying to, if anybody who's worked with Claire knows this, like, there's a point where it's like, you just stop trying to mask things. Because she's like, all right, now tell me what's really going on. It's like, fuck. But it shows you how conditioned we are. Like, it was hard to get to that point where I could just show up as I was feeling, and it took somebody calling me on it consistently. I'm like, how many people in my life just let me like.
Well, again, because it's easier. They don't have to deal with the. And I'll call you because I can deal with the messy stuff just as easily as I can deal with the fun stuff. The fun stuff sometimes is more fun to deal with, but I don't. It's not about what I want to do. It's about I want to be with you where you're at.
Well, in dealing with the messy stuff when it's present, the hard stuff means that when we have the fun stuff, there is nothing like.
It's really fun.
It's
really fun. Like, we have some serious fun, but it's unadulterated fun. Like, it's like there's no holding back. There's nothing else in the space. It's like, this is just what's present, and it's really cool.
Anything cool chicks.
Yeah, we are. tweet. I was watching. Sorry, because it came up. I was watching a movie this morning. It was a cartoon movie. This person said he was signing something, but he was using a chicken's beak to do it. And he was like, well, if you sign something using a bird, it's called tweeting. Sorry, just had to leave on that note because it made me smile this morning. Anything you want to add about toxic positivity? Not that was toxic positivity, wanting to end on a joke. It just was present. That's what was in the space. So I decided to share it.
And that's like, we're going to talk about absolutes. Like, sometimes
Sometimes it is ending on a joke.
Yeah. Like,
and sometimes it isn't.
It's just honoring what's present.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We will speak to you again really soon. Stay safe. Remember to keep meeting your needs. And in the meantime, we're sending you lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and give us a written review,
as it will help more people find us. And remember, toxic positivity very rarely meets anyone's needs. What really meets your needs is being human and whole.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.